All right, welcome to Normal Men. Everyone's in a great mood today because the weather is excellent and it's not a crazy cold winter with massive snow and ice piles everywhere and below freezing temperatures in outer Florida. So, yeah, you're catching us all at a good time.
Yeah, at least y'all get the snow. Like, it's just miserably cold here.
The snow's not a good part here. I have, like, nowhere to park. I have nowhere to put the trash bins. There's, like, I literally can't walk to, like, the train station because all of the sidewalks are 2.5 feet high of just snow. I have now sent 2 of the saltiest old man emails to my mayor's office that I have ever written in my life. I CC'd the local paper.
Oh my God.
Because these like, I called the local public works and they say, we're working 24/7. No, you're not. You're sleeping. I know that. But also, like, they got the roads perfectly clear day one. I go to the town line between my shitty town and the next slightly less shitty town. They have cleaned everything up. It is beautiful. It is impeccable. My side, you get 12 inches to walk. And by the way, if you go to the train station, the signal to cross the street is 4 feet back in a snowbank. What I'm saying is I have feelings. So enjoy not having the snow because you're having a better time.
We have snow. That's the thing. And we also have probably 1/100th of the plow density per capita down here.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
This is Normal Men, a podcast from 4 men who are clinging desperately to normalcy in an era when that's asking a bit too much. I'm George in Charlotte.
In DC, I'm Proctor Malone.
In outer Florida, I'm low-tax speedrun enjoyer.
And I'm Ed in Boston.
Next up, we have a really great interview with my friend Skelly at iid.bsky.social. We are going to talk about the differences between the United States and France, what it's like being an academic, all sorts of stuff related to higher education and how we got to the place we have with just the absurdity of college admissions and all that stuff in the United States, and also what it's like being an American abroad right now in the age of Trump. So we hope you enjoy that, and thanks for listening. All right, I'm going to stop it now. It's always nice when the person not in France is the one waking up with an 8:30 morning cigarette. I mean, that's... Get after it, bruh.
That's the 3 C's, 3 C's breakfast and French breakfast.
Yeah, coffee,
cafe,
croissant. Yeah.
cigarette, croissant.
In outer Florida, it's just cigarettes.
It's just 3 cigarettes at the same time.
It's cigarettes and coffee, but yeah.
Yeah, it's 2 cigarettes, 1 coffee, no croissant.
That's right. That's right.
Which is really tragic.
All right, welcome to Normal Men. That voice you can hear in the background is this week's guest, my friend Skelly.
Hello.
Who is an American academic living abroad in France. And we wanted to have her on this week to talk a little bit about what that experience has been like. Obviously, this has been a very tumultuous period for both academia and for Americans in general, but we wanted to get her perspective on it being abroad in France because it's obviously a very different vibe when you're not surrounded by other Americans, some of whom might have had a pretty large role to play in ushering this last year or so of chaos in. So without further ado, Skelly, welcome. Thanks for coming on Normal Men this week. And how are you doing over there?
Hi. I am great. Just enjoying a rainy and gloomy Western French afternoon, but doing pretty well.
What are the winters like over there? Is it pretty?
Well, so I'm in the southwest of France. I'm in Bordeaux. So it is, and originally I'm from California. I'm from Northern California, Bay Area, and actually the weather's pretty similar. Kind of both wine countries, right? So we never get ice or snow really. We might get a little bit of flurry, but basically just rainy in the winter. Too hot in the summer. It's more humid over here. We got that Atlantic humidity, which I don't enjoy as a low humidity California girl.
I mean, it's all relative.
But it's not
like
too
Bordeaux is fine in the summer if you're from the southeast. If you're from California,
Some of us are from the desert, okay?
Yeah, no, awesome part of France. One of my favorite vacations my wife and I have ever done. We drove from Tours down to Bordeaux, spent time in Saint-Emilion, and then flew home out of Bordeaux as well. So yeah, it's great. If you ever get the chance, Southwest France is awesome.
It's gorgeous. Yeah, just really beautiful. I mean, you've got like great beaches, and then the Pyrenees are not so far. So
yeah. So I think anybody, obviously we're making it sound great. So anybody would be like, oh yeah, cool, let's go live there. Why exactly are you living in France? Like what took you there? Was it career stuff entirely, or are you one of these, I need to get out of the US people? I mean, this is a leading question.
Yeah.
I know the answers to these things. But
Of course. No, I've never met you before. Well, I'll give the story of how I ended up here. So I did my PhD at University of California, Davis, and I finished my PhD in 21, so right into COVID. And so I stuck around for a bit, did a postdoc with my same PhD advisor, which is what they tell you not to do. But COVID couldn't handle moving. But I had already at that time a offer from a French academic who I'd been working with for some years. And he was interested in me coming out as a postdoc. And at the time I was like, I don't know, because my French, I did study French in school, but I'm not a language person, and living abroad by yourself is a little bit intimidating, but it did seem very exciting. And then, in 21, I don't know, I started to get some bad juju. Like that was when the Roe decision came down, the Dobbs decision came down. And I think I just thought to myself, maybe this would be a good time just to this is a great opportunity for my research, and maybe it would be a good time to spend some time out of the US, see what that's like. In retrospect, a really solid decision because, I ended up moving over here in early 2022. And so now I've been here going on 3 years. And yeah, I mean, the situation in the US has gotten pretty rough. I mean, so for me, I started out as a postdoc at a research institute, and I was actually able to transition into a permanent sort of faculty position. That the way that things work in Europe is slightly different than the way they work in the US, if you're familiar with the university system in the US. But I have a full-time research faculty position here, which is really nice because it gives me security that is a lot more difficult to come by in the US, especially right now. Like, it's always hard to get a tenure track position, and then getting tenure is a difficult thing to do. It takes usually 5 years, and you go up for tenure review. But right now, at least from my circles, what I'm hearing is that finding those tenure track positions has gotten astronomically more difficult, depending on what field you're in. So anyway, that was how I ended up over here. Basically a lucky connection. But I did want to do that because I wanted the experience, and I ended up really liking the life over here. And I like the way they organize academia. I can talk about that if there's any interest in that as well.
Yeah, I mean, hearing how the French system is different from the American one, or is it standard across European countries versus, or not at all?
No, not at all. Yeah, so this is interesting, right? So you said you wanted to talk a little bit about European academia and your Americans moving to Europe. And one thing I thought about when I was thinking about this is I really want to point out that Europe is not, uniform here, right? So every European country, and usually people wrap the UK in when they're talking about that, but it's not part of the EU, so it's under a completely different funding structure. Although they did rejoin Project Horizon, which is one of the major funding sharing schemes in science across European countries.
Wait, I thought Brexit meant Brexit. What are we doing here?
Yeah, no. Hard Brexit. Oh, whoops. Oxbridge doesn't have any money anymore. This is a problem. Yeah, no. So yeah, that was because of Brexit that happened, was why the UK was out of Project Horizon for a while, and it messed up a lot of people's grant funding. It seemed like a nightmare, including actually a collaborator of mine. It was terrible. But yeah, so every European country has their own way of doing it. And I'm familiar with the French system at this point, but it was so funny. About 3 days after I got here, I went into at that time, my PI's office. And I was like, Nicola, I have no idea what's going on. Like, I need you to explain to me how the French system works, because everyone keeps saying all these acronyms and I don't know what any of them mean. And he filled up 2 full whiteboards explaining to me how the French system is organized.
Good Lord.
And it still probably took me another year to really wrap my head around it. But from an American perspective, we're very used to everything being oriented around our universities. And in France, there are universities, of course, the CNRS system, but there's also a very large network of institutes, which are probably closest to the national labs, but do function differently. And they're more responsible for the research arm of like French academia than the national labs are responsible for the American arm of research. But then in Germany, things are totally different, right? So the German system has the Max Planck Institutes, which are kind of notorious for not liking to hire permanent researchers. So in Germany, there's this 45-year-old postdoc problem that people run into. And then in Italy, tends to be a little bit of a waiting game, like that there's kind of these positions you move into as people retire, right?
These are so far matching up very nicely with my like biases around the character of each country. Like in Italy, it's like you'll get there eventually. You just got to wait a while. In Germany, it's like very, very strange system that doesn't really make much sense to anybody. In France, like this is great. This is like, yeah.
Well, it's so funny actually when I got to France, like, academia, especially in the US, it's a little feudal, like even to this day. There's a lot of focus on hierarchy. There's a lot of focus on titles. So when you come in, one of the classic mistakes that a young researcher will make is not properly addressing their PI like as a doctor or professor. Like that's sort of a cliche. Yeah, like you almost always are going to get a testy email if you don't use the right title when you're a first-year grad student. Sounds ridiculous saying it now. But...
Just to break in, for those who may not know, PI is a principal investigator. So that's going to be kind of the chief of your immediate tribe. So.
Right. It's your local king or prince of your principality, to keep with the feudal metaphor. So yeah, PI, principal investigator, that's the person whose name is on whatever grant you're being paid out of, or your professor if you're a grad student, typically. So in the US, it's like you're always referring to people with their titles. It's a very hierarchical system where you have the grad students and then you have the postdocs and then you have the professors. And then even above the professors, you might have, the lead PIs who are in charge of junior professors. In France, they sort of told me right away, they were like, it's a lot flatter. Like they were like, no titles. First of all, everyone calls each other by their first name. And the institute I'm at, there technically are 2 levels of director and chargé de recherche, which is just researcher, but it's kind of meaningless. So adjusting to that was a little funny, and it was a very democratic French way of doing it. If you get too big for your britches, someone might chop your head off. That kind of energy.
Yeah, I was going to say they probably started out more the American route, and then some guys in some neon vests started rioting about it. And
there was the yellow vest. No, I mean, a lot of it is post-war, right? Well, I mean, so I'm not going to lecture on the history of French academia. I couldn't even if I wanted to.
Nobody wants that. No. We don't want the full, no. If anyone says the word Foucault, we're ending this interview.
What about Bourbaki? Can I talk? No, okay. But the French civil corps was set up by Napoleon originally. And that's actually what still exists, is this civil corps of engineers. And technically that's still the substrate. But post-war, a lot of things were set up that were these institutes. And they have these very Cold War era names, all these acronyms everywhere. So there's INRAE, which is the Agricultural Institute, and there's so many of them. And because all of these institutes are at the same level, and there isn't a Ivy League, we kind of think of the Sorbonne as the comparison to the Ivy League, but it's really not. There isn't really anything comparable to that in France, where in the US there is sort of this cult around these, 15 or so universities that have all of the clout, which I really prefer. I didn't actually realize how frustrating that was until I went to France, and it is more democratic.
Even that has kind of textures in the U.S., right? There's definitely a difference between undergraduate prestige and various kinds of grad school prestige. And, you said that you're a UC Davis doctorate, so I assume that you are proudly on the side of the publics.
Yes, I'm a state school girl here.
I'm a professor's kid from a Publix, so that's my exposure to academia, and my sense is that at least in the research world, and maybe this had something to do with the area that I grew up with the most exposure to, there was a lot more leveling between Ivies and R1s elsewhere. That a good research university was a good research university and a good researcher was a good researcher. But that's definitely not true. Like when you're comparing undergrad prestige, there's a significant gulf between, the Ivies and the football schools and then the rest of them. And that's, I think, something that honestly played in American politics to our detriment in this last election. That neither Harris nor Walz had the right degrees.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to get into this topic, but it's something I've posted on Blue Sky a lot about, and I think a lot about is this issue of, because I'm an academic and I think a lot about the way academia plays in politics and in the world, this issue of prestige more so for undergrads and the way that it kind of, this college race that's become so inextricable from childhood in middle-class America, where everything is about, once you get into high school, everything's about the SATs. It's about, reading the U.S. college rankings and making sure that you're at a university that's in those rankings. And that, I think, has taken on a life that's made people very bitter about the fact that realistically, not that many people can go to Harvard. Like it, put aside all of the other stuff, all the legacy admissions, all of that, the race issues, the issues of gender, anything else. Just the fact that there's physically only so many people who can attend Harvard University. And that causes necessarily this attitude of bitterness where parents identify, usually correctly, that their child is intelligent, is smart, should go to good universities, should be able to have a nice education, but cannot possibly get their child into that upper strata. Which is why I'm such a state school, not just my own experiences, but I'm such a proponent of well-funded, well-attended, and high-prestige state schools, like the University of California system, because they can be expanded in a way and can provide more education in a way that you can't do with Harvard. Like you can't make more Harvards, but you can build more universities of California.
You can and you can't, right? Like, I mean, there is one traditional solution to not having enough Harvards, and it's to build Stanford.
Yes, but then you only have one Stanford, right? Right. Like, I mean, it's not clear how replicable it is, and it clearly doesn't scale with population. Whereas something like the UC system, I mean, California is a great example because you've got the UC sitting on top of the CS system, and then very good community colleges underneath that are providing meaningful entree to a large number of people to areas that they wouldn't necessarily have entree to elsewhere. Like it's shocking to me how much better California has done on that than most of the rest of the country. That this is something that exists in California that doesn't exist in the same sense. I grew up in Washington State. We've got a Floridian here. I don't know what they're doing for education, but I think they didn't they stop doing that out there.
Well, we stopped at New College. I will say though, how many BCS national championships does the Cal system have? Proctor.
Okay, well, we want to get actually. That was another culture shock thing with France is that they do not connect sports to university. I mean, the sporting world is a totally separate thing from the academic world. And that was I remember I mentioned something about college sports to someone here, a French person. And they asked me what I was talking about. We got into a conversation. And the look on their face, like trying to explain what college sports was as a concept, I don't think they ever really understood. And honestly, the more I thought about it, the less I understood. I was like, I don't know if I understand this either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of one of these weird historical accidents, right? Like you had these sort of devolved regional nexi of of culture and of federal funding, but also of state funding. And that sort of aggregated some other aspects of cultural cachet. And at some point, we went crazy for football, and that's...
It also helps to keep donors attached to the university, yes. Which, a lot of U.S. schools rely heavily upon.
Yeah. Well, but then, right then it goes back to this issue of funding, right? And the issue of, and I can't speak as extensively on this as maybe I should be able to as a professional academic, but I think that that's something, right now, American academia, American research is in a dark place. I think we can all understand that. But the silver lining that I hope for out of this era is maybe some conversation and reckoning about the way in which research in the post-World War II, world, this is basically the last century of American research, how it's been organized and where we've ended up. Because, everyone talks about tuition, right? And American universities have gotten to this place where the sticker shock is absurd and these funding models are absurd. I'm sorry, they are. Like, things are connected to semi-professional sporting for some reason. Like, this doesn't make sense that a school, whose responsibility to a student should be to teach them chemistry lab is somehow now like economically tied to the performance of 19-year-old football stars. It's a very strange situation. And I think one of the nice things about going to another country is you see that is not required. Like, the way that the university system is set up in France, they don't attach it to a semi-professional sporting league, right? And I'm not saying that everything about it is better, but one thing I do like about France culturally in the way that students get their education is that it feels, I don't know how to say this, like more professionalized in a way. Like, American culture has so much made the university experience into a cultural experience where you go to a 4-year university and you live on campus and there's all these things attached to that. There's Greek life, there's the dorm experience. And I have a lot of personal fondness for that. I did live at a residential college. I went to a liberal arts college for my undergrad. And I enjoy a lot of aspects of that. I enjoy the whole college green experience, But you come to a university in France and you see that kids are popping in and out of courses because they're cheaper. It's, a couple €100 maybe. And they might also be doing professional opportunities, working, whatever it may be. They're living in the city, they're living in the world. And so there isn't this pressure to make sure that at 18, you have to be at the right school or your life is over, which I think a lot of upper middle class American kids feel.
The cultural anxiety around getting students onto the right track, I have seen in my own social circles here in Charlotte, which is not as much of a pressure cooker for this stuff as, for instance, like a suburb of New York City or Manhattan or something like that, or the Bay or LA or, whatever. Here, I have seen someone say, well, I need to get my kid who, by the way, this kid had developmental disabilities. I need to get my kid into this preschool so then they can get into this K-6 so they can get into this high school so they can get into whatever college. And it's like, what? I do interviews for my alma mater and I see kids who are clearly the product of this kind of optimization. Great resume, come across very well in terms of how they speak and they'd be a great contributor to any college campus, right? Like, I'm not knocking any kids here, but kids like this who I think would be excellent, on campus, get in at a rate that I can only describe as impossible. Like, I think I've had one student outright accepted in the past 7 or 8 years of doing both regular and early decision interviews. And like, I don't think that's a comment on any of the kids. I think it's just like the numbers game. Like, when there's a country as large as the United States with as many people chasing status as we have, and the optimization is doable, getting into these sort of prestigious institutions, which sometimes are great educational facilities and sometimes are not, like, it really depends. When you're chasing that status so hard, it becomes a numbers game regardless of the structures. Like regardless of how good the student is, regardless of anything you have any agency over, it's entirely a numbers game, and you're just in a big pool, and maybe you get picked out and maybe you don't, and good luck. Like, so I think that really influences it as well in the United States for the worse, because there's a lot, like parents especially, but kids too, are trying to exercise agency over a process that they can't possibly have agency over because the numbers are too big.
Yeah, George, I think you were dropped out when we were talking about this issue of the Ivy League prestige and the kind of quasi-Ivy League prestige in the US, and how the scarcity of that drives especially sort of this upper middle class strata just totally crazy, just out of their minds. Like, I think a lot about that case. God, what was her name? Abigail, the young woman down in Texas who sued, I think Texas A&M maybe, about feeling that she deserved to get in. And I thought that case, that case was pretty ridiculous, but I could kind of empathize with this feeling of her record was not bad. She was a good student and she wanted to go to a good school, and the scarcity of the name. I don't think that this is a scarcity of actual educational opportunities, but I do think it is a scarcity of the prestige, and it's an artificial scarcity, and it makes people crazy. And I think academia, some aspects of academia are encouraged to further that scarcity, right? Because it is a competitive world. You want more the lower the acceptance rate is for a university, the higher their prestige goes up. So the more applications they can pull in, the more people they can say they reject, the higher their US News ranking goes. So this becomes a cycle.
The Abigail Fisher, I think her name was, case you mentioned, is so funny because at the time, she sued trying to get into UT Austin. At the time...
Oh, it was UT, yeah.
Yeah. At the time, they were accepting the top 10% of the high school class in your high school, regardless. So, like, if you're in the top decile, you're in. That's it. No more questions asked. And she wasn't. So, like, skill
Which
issue?
Which is funny, right? Because that's a very, like, okay, black or white. That's kind of like in California, if you get above, I think it's, at least when I was a student, I think it was above a 3.5, you were guaranteed entry to at least one UC. And typically, that meant Merced. But, it's that kind of thing, which I think that kind of thing is really useful, because then it takes the pressure off students to say, like, okay, if you meet this clear-cut standard, then you will get an education that is of at least this quality. But that doesn't solve the prestige issue, for sure. This artificial scarcity thing.
Yeah.
And I don't really know. I don't really know what would. I'm sorry, this might be a little tangential, but I love the show Gilmore Girls, not because, it's a fun show, but what I like it as is I feel like it is the best commentary on this issue that has ever been written, because the character of Rory, like, goes through this process, and she's set in, like, the early 2000s, right? And I think that was really when this became a massive cultural thing, where her whole life is built around getting to a university with this name. And that is the tension of the story, right? And the way in which we accepted that as a completely normal, yes, this is a good dramatic tension, is kind of incredible in retrospect.
Yeah, we're going way down a rabbit hole here, but for my money, some of this is tied to the history of the Common Application, which hits another hobby horse of mine, which is good ideas that have unintended consequences. So for those who may not be steeped in the process, the Common Application is a portion of a college application that you can do and you can use to apply to lots and lots of different colleges. Good idea, right? Saves time for students, makes things easier. The problem is that as it's become more and more universal, and this really accelerated right around 2000, when the Common App went digital and many more colleges started accepting it, is that it means that students apply to many more colleges because it's easier for them to do so. So if you're playing that numbers game, what it means is that whereas previously you might have had students apply to 4 or 5 schools, now that same student might be applying to 20 or 25.
This is where you get those occasional feel-good stories where, like, some student has gotten into every Ivy League school or whatever, and that is purely just spamming applications and random chance. Like that's all that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have however many, I mean, I don't know what the numbers would be on this, but if you've got whatever tens of thousands of kids who are all applying to all Ivy Leagues and you roll that die that many times, one of them is going to come up all sixes, right?
Yeah. And it is not a comment on that being some sort of superlative excellent. Like there are, like you said, tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands, honestly, of students who are
probably
just as impressive, just as, whatever evaluation you want to make. And they just didn't roll sixes. Yeah.
I mean, like almost everybody in the application pool here, I shouldn't say that. A good chunk of the people in the application pool were tall enough to ride the ride. It's just a matter of whose number gets pulled. So anyway.
And the other thing is, once you get far out of distribution in anything, assessing the difference between things becomes really, really hard, right? Like think about this in terms of, I don't know, like nuclear weapons. Like the difference between a nuclear weapon and a hand grenade is really clear. The difference between two different nuclear weapons, it's really, I mean, it does, you don't.
Well, they do have numbers for that.
They do, but like if you're just looking at it, I mean, if you're not doing the physics behind it, because you can't do the physics behind what makes a good college applicant.
Not do the physics behind nuclear war.
No. You can do the physics behind nuclear war. You can't do the physics behind, So if you're just a crude observer, like trying to get a basic idea, a hand grenade versus a nuclear weapon is like, yeah, okay, I can tell the difference between those things. You can't tell the difference up close between two different nuclear weapons. You can, make whatever claims you want, but sorry, you can't. Like, so it's the same thing, right?
I'm just giving you a hard time, but yeah, I mean, what you're talking about here is the issue scale, right?
Yeah.
Like you, at some point, you get these large number effects where, there's just, you can compare between two kids maybe, but also, I mean, the question, and this, again, we're getting even further maybe from the topic, but you start to get into the question of what even is a relevant standard to hold kids to. Like, how are you supposed to test children, like 17-year-old kids? What predicts success? Like, does a score on the SAT even mean, a higher score on the SAT even mean that a child more deserves to go to some university versus another? I mean, generally people talk about cutoff scores, I think. Like, okay, if you really bomb an exam, that probably means that you are not in a place where you're likely to succeed in the educational environment that you may want to go to. But a difference between a perfect score and 10 points off is essentially negligible, right? You're so far down on the other side of the scale, which is what you're talking about with the bomb comparison. And then there are different environments. So you're going from high school to university. The skill set is different. The environment is different. You really, the level that you can actually predict success, it's unclear. And this gets even more obvious when you go to grad school, because the transition from university into grad school, and I can only speak to STEM, right? So I'm talking about going from class environment into research environment. And the skill set that you need for a classroom environment is a very different skill set to a research environment. You're tested as a 22-year-old on your skills from the classroom, and then that's how you're admitted into grad school. That is known to be a faulty method because there's not a great correlation. I think actually the last APS research, and if I got this wrong, apologies, but I believe the last APS study showed that there was no correlation between scores on the physics GRE and ultimate success in terms of graduation on time for physics PhDs, that's the degree I hold. And of course, you can say all these things, but then what are you supposed to do, right? You have to have some way of choosing which kids are going to go to which school. So I'm not arguing that, we need to just throw everything out completely, but it is worth keeping in mind, especially when we look at how crazy people go over this, that a lot of this is potentially not even real in the way that we want it to be real. We want to say that, it definitely means that these kids will succeed if they go to the right school. A lot of it's more random than that. Like, maybe sometimes the kid has a bad breakup and that's why he doesn't do well. Like it's.
I played college football at a very quote unquote elite academic institution. Let me tell you, the range of people that can have successful academic outcomes in that environment, despite on paper looking like they would have no chance at all, is high, right? Like I'm thinking of one particular teammate, a guy I was pretty close with in college, who came from an exurb in an Ohio town. I'm not going to name the town, but he came from there, and he just first couple of years was useless in the classroom, like just trying to pass was the goal and whatever. He started dating a girl who was much more serious, another student athlete. She was like, no, dude, this ain't going to fly. If you want to be with me, you need to get it together. And boy, did he ever get it together. Ended up graduating with a comp sci degree, like was legitimately academically impressive when he put his mind to it, but would never have opened that up if he hadn't been inside the doors already because he played football, right? So not that everybody I played football was like that, but it's just a good example of the idea that if you were trying to identify somebody who would get a lot out of that experience being at that school, initially, you would never have picked him. There's no test you could have done to say that's the, he's going to do well. And yet, right? Mm-hmm. So it's all so contingent. I kind of wonder if the only like decent way to do this is just make it a lottery. Like if you have to hit a few minimum cutoff scores, like whatever, minimum GPA, minimum SAT, that's way below the level. And after that, go nuts.
Yeah, to be honest, I kind of agree with that. I mean, I can see pitfalls, but I have always kind of been partial to that idea where it's like above whatever cutoff, it's just random. I mean, people have talked about that for grant funding as well. So to go back to like professional academia, we have this exact same problem where the NSF review, NIH reviews for grants above a certain level. It's not that everything has equal merit, but on some level, you're looking at professional proposals from a already highly selected group of people. The discernment is very difficult. And so some people have argued, we'll just make it a lottery, just fund a random selection of grants. And honestly, I'm not sure it would be a bad idea, at least to test out.
Yeah, I mean, my take on that is that unless you think there's significant reason to believe that there's diminishing marginal returns to the spending from whatever the pool is coming from, the answer to that, if you have a bunch of good proposals, is to increase the total level of funding so that, I mean, if you're not at a cliff where suddenly you're getting less results out of putting money in the research machine, keep putting money in the research machine. It's a good bet. We have demonstrated that it's a good bet.
You're never going to hear me argue against that.
So, but I mean, this kind of gets to the direction of another hobby horse of mine, which is this is, I guess, the neutral evil argument for diversity here, right? Like there's an argument for diversity from equity that I think is a good argument, but that's not the argument I'm going to make right now. The argument for diversity from the just min-maxing perspective, from the we care about results perspective. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. From the amoral, just make number go up as high as you can perspective, is that you should want diversity more to the extent that you can't do discernment well. If you can't assess things well, then you need to have more humility about your intake, right? You need to say, okay, well, we think that this looks pretty good, but we're not sure that this shape of student is necessarily going to be the best student. So we need to take a few different shapes of student. We need to hedge our bets. And the second element is that the less certain you are about the future, the less focused you should be, and the more diverse your recruitment needs to be. Because it may be that skills that are adaptive in the future are not the same as skills that are adaptive now.
Proctor has just reinvented index investing from first principles. So
yes, but for humans.
We're proud of you, buddy. Yeah, right. No, I mean, it's the exact same. That's literally all you're doing. Instead of picking stocks, you're picking people, and it removes some of the.
We're gonna get into human capital here. That's about to come out.
Like, you don't even need to go down that rabbit hole to be like, that person is a good investment bet. It's more like just understanding that when you have a diverse portfolio of stuff, you're not betting on an individual, you're betting on how the individuals react or interact with one another. In other words, like, the downside over here is offset by the upside over here and vice versa. And so we're looking for a process that's more about correlation than it is about ultimate outcomes. And diversification in stocks or people is almost always to the better. It's very rare that you end up in a worse off place from doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is, you want to, from my more statistics point of view rather than an econ point of view, it's like you want to get a representative sample of whatever your your pool of talent is, because, yeah, you don't know necessarily, like you don't know what the shape of the economy is going to be 4 to 8 years down the road when those students that you're picking to go to university are now going to be entering the workforce. And the skills that they might have might become more relevant. So it does make more sense to me to, instead of hyper specific, tailoring exactly one type of student, which I do think has been, I mean, athletics is a different thing, right? A lot of students end up in school on athletic scholarships who may not otherwise. But from me being like, super high achieving nerd type, that type of student is very well pruned at this point, to the point where you're saying, George, like parents are trying to get kids into certain preschools because they're prepping that far in advance for their student to be, head of the robotics club, volunteers at X, Y, and Z, takes 8 classes their senior year of college and 5 of them are APs, or whatever the model is for like the perfect academic student.
I'm already starting to see that with my 6th grader, that, you've got teachers explicitly talking about, okay, this is something that will help you in the college, in college applications. This is something that will improve your position for scholarships. And on the one hand, this seems way too early and maybe undesirable. And on the other hand, maybe that's the way the game is played.
I think at this point it is. I mean, that's about when my parents sat me down. I think it was in middle school. They were like, at this point, we have to be looking ahead. And, I don't think that they did wrong there. I mean, it was just, that's the reality, especially when we're talking about the amount of money. Like for me, my parents were they really wanted to not burden me with student loans. Like that was a priority for them. And we weren't in a place where they could afford to just pay for me to go to college. So, they wanted me to focus on my academics because there wasn't going to be a sporting talent. And like, how else is I going to, make it in? So they wanted me to focus on my academics because they were like, realistically, the best way for you to get an education is to get a scholarship, because otherwise students end up with these massive loans. And that that's kind of the economic driver below all of this cultural stuff that we're talking about.
I think you can optimize for good outcomes in terms of not having student loans, like getting good scholarships, et cetera, getting the degree you want to get, or you can optimize for prestige. I don't think you can optimize for both at the same time. Maybe at a certain resource level it's possible, but I'm very skeptical, in part because one of those processes, the prestige process, is so driven by randomness, and in part because those other goals are sometimes directly contradictory to the prestige approach. Like it's really hard to, there's sort of a trilemma there, or maybe it's an even bigger optimization problem than that. But there's certainly a class of kid who doesn't have to worry about this stuff. And I, to be fair, 100% belong to that class. My parents did not sit me down in middle school to talk about college. They talked about going to college in the United States and how much they enjoyed it and how great it was. So yeah, I still got messaging there, but it wasn't like, you need to have this plan. When I was looking to go to schools, like I had to go and figure out how to practice for the SAT, because I was in Canada and you can take the SAT in Canada, but like no one does. So, how do I practice for this? So like I did that entirely out of my own motivation. I went and found an SAT practice book and spent Saturday mornings taking the SAT practice tests and whatever. I have to assume that helped at the margin as opposed to hurt. But I also didn't have an interview, right? Like I didn't have an alumni interview to make this stuff obvious that like I was just this random kid in the mountains trying to go down to a school in the Southeast US. I think the further you are down a track that is optimizing for that prestige outcome, the harder it's going to be to differentiate yourself and the more you're relying on blind luck. And everyone's relying on blind luck to some degree, but man, it is just depressing to see how high quality some of these kids are who just, nope, not interested.
Yeah. And I mean, you hope from the aggregate perspective that everybody finds a niche somewhere, right? That there's something in the broadness of the American or the international educational system that gets people to that next level. Well,
sorry, did you want to move on?
No.
Just to add to that, I mean, I think, we're talking about the kind of implicitly, the tragedy of like, okay, not every kid can go to Harvard. But I would say, again, I'm a state school girl, so I actually think you get a better education personally. This is just my opinion, but I have been, I've been on a lot of university campuses. I've been in a lot of classrooms. I've taught at R1s. I've taught at liberal arts colleges. And for my money, and this is my own experience, so, take it with a grain of salt, but I think that the best education that you can get as a young person is at like a mid-sized, not research-focused or lightly research-focused university that maybe doesn't even have any particular name. Like Reed comes up in this conversation a lot. Oberlin, like these are the kind of universities, they're quite expensive often. But the reason I say without research is because, so for instance, I went to a small liberal arts school and it was, I sort of had this trade-off that you're talking about, Georgia. I focused on being able to pay for it. So I was not at a very prestigious school, but they had a very good physics program. And I was really realistically the only student there who was going to go into a research program. And because of that, I got a lot of personalized attention, a level of which I would never have gotten at an R1. Just simply impossible, because those professors would have been much more focused on their own grad students. And obviously, that was luck, that was various things. So every kid who goes to a liberal arts college is not going to have that experience. But I do think that's a teaching school. That's what they're focused on. And they're not focused on the research stuff, which is it's somewhat orthogonal to teaching. So students who don't end up in this prestige system, I think often end up with better academic experiences. I don't know how you want to put that on a scale, but they often will, get more focused educational experiences for sure, that are not distracted by whatever other thing is going on for that university's image, that university's research agenda. So that's the only thing I wanted to point out there.
Yeah. Well, making a quantum leaping conversation here, I would be really curious what it's like living in France as an American right now, and sort of what the takes you hear from people. I mean, obviously, anything that you experience is going to be mediated through whatever social relationship you have with the person in question, right? Like, I'm sure your colleagues are not like, oh, like, let's say mean stuff to Skelly because Skelly is an American and we don't like Trump or something like that. But, at the same time, I'm sure you do get commentary.
You're underestimating the recreational enjoyment the French have of saying mean things.
I mean, that's okay, fair. In any other country, maybe I would have been. If you were 50 miles south in Spain, you would get maybe a little different.
No. Okay, I'm making a joke. My French colleagues actually they're very, very sweet. And I mean, okay, so one thing I'll say is, and this is maybe my own fault because my French is not the greatest. I'm working very hard on it, but my circles are primarily international, right? Like, so the lab that I work at, it is bilingual officially. So I do speak French there sometimes, but it's perfectly fine to be an English speaker. And a lot of the people who work there are French, but many of them have lived abroad. And then there's also a lot of international people, a lot of Canadians. It's really common for people who grew up in French Canada to spend some time in France if they're in their research career. So there's a lot of Canadians. And then the circles in my like personal life also tend to be, kind of expat focused. Like the most common way you end up with a French friend is that you have some English speaking friend who's married into the French, married into the French population. And so you get their spouse as part of the bargain. But yeah, I would say that overall, so I spent some time here 10 years ago as an undergrad. That's aging myself, but I was here 10 years ago during Bush, and it was early Obama, but the hangover of Bush was still around. And I remember it being a lot harder edged. Like, I remember people being a little testy. This time, the attitude, and it may just be that I'm older and I'm more discerning about who I'm going to spend my time with, but the attitude feels more pitying. I have several French colleagues who I've expressed frustration about my country to, and they've just looked at me and been like, well, we had Napoleon. And I'm like, well, that was some time ago.
Yeah.
It's like, first of all, comparisons I guess this is the scale of history that we're now accepting that Trump is going to impact, which is upsetting. But then also, that means that the relevance of Trump to the United States for the foreseeable future is not going away, the same way that Napoleon is still relevant to France even today. But they definitely are like, okay, they recognize that it's a terrible thing, like it's a tragedy that's happened to my country. And I think that there's sympathy there. Maybe relevant, but there's also a fairly sizable Russian population in French academia. And I think it's a similar relationship there, where a lot of the people who have come from Russia, they did not have a choice. If they wanted to continue living in continue pursuing an academic career, continue living a life that allowed them to interface with Westerners freely and to speak freely, they had to leave. And that is not the situation in the US yet, maybe hopefully never. But certainly that is the reality for Russian scientists, and people here understand that.
I mean, we talked earlier about how post-war there was sort of a refactoring of the French research academic system, right? And that was heavily driven, as it was worldwide, by brain drain from substantially from, not exclusively from, but substantially from Germany. That you had a situation where there were lots of extremely skilled knowledge workers who all of a sudden had very good reasons to move. And from the perspective of rah-rah Americanism, I worry a lot that that's happening right now. I worry that we're losing people like, for instance, Skelly to France. And we're not going to get those people back. They're going to go marry Frenchmen. They're going to go
well, God, don't curse me.
Yeah, that's awfully rude, Proctor.
I got to keep that Napoleon thing in my back pocket here. Like if anybody from France gives me any shit on Blue Sky or something,
Are there any French people on Blue Sky?
Yes, actually, there are quite a few French people on Blue Sky, but you have to type in French to have them show up.
There we go. I'm gonna bust up Google Translate and get into it.
You're Canadian. Shouldn't you have this in your back pocket?
Un petit peu.
I was sitting here thinking, George asked Skelly about how the French are treating the Americans, and then she mentioned that a lot of Quebecois go over there. I'd imagine they probably catch more shit than the Americans do.
They have their own psychosexual relationship that
we do not have the time to get into the Quebecois Francais thing. Like, that's just too much. Like, no.
The Quebecois-French relationship is something that cannot be understood from the outside.
The Quebecois-Canadian relationship is extremely Byzantine, complicated, and insane. And it's orders of magnitude worse with France. Like, it's just, there's Acadians involved. It's just it's not.
I was just in New Brunswick last summer for a friend's wedding, and I was presented with Chiac, the French. So Chiac is beyond Quebecois. So once I started getting better at French, I was able to. The French, they are brutal about the Quebecois accent. They're so mean about it, like meaner than anything else, which is saying something, right? And when I really started to be able to speak French properly, I started being able to hear it, and I was like, oh. Yeah,
describing it as a country bumpkin is sort of not sufficient. Like it's like country bumpkin, but in a way that is distilled over centuries. It's that level of messed up.
It's okay, so if you imagine the most, if you're a native English speaker and you imagine the most Midwestern or really Ooper, Michigan Ooper voice, and that is what Quebecois sounds like for a French speaker, but then maybe even magnified a couple fold.
I don't even know if there's an equivalent in English because there's such a diversity of country bumpkin English. So Aussie English versus Southern US Southern English versus a really Canadian English accent. They're all very country bumpkinish in a certain sense, but in different ways, and we're used to that. Whereas with French, it's no, it's the Quebecois. That's the one.
Yeah. Well, because French as a language, and yeah, this is a whole topic, and I think so much about French as a language, so I'll ramble. But French as a language is so much more strict on pronunciation in general than like English is, right? Like English is a consonant heavy language, and we are very lazy with our vowels. Whereas with French, almost all the information is in the vowel sound. So they're very strict about the pronunciation, which can be annoying, but also sort of necessary for the information to actually be perceived. And the vowel shift from French to Quebecois is extreme. so that's why the accent is so strong. But anyway, so what I was saying is Chiac is like beyond Quebecois. So if you know Quebecois, Chiac is beyond. It's really a blend completely of French and English. It's like je drive mon car kind of level.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that is where you're at. And I was hearing this, and I was speaking to my friend's mother-in-law to be, and she was speaking Chiac to me, and I felt as though I were having a stroke. It was a lot. I don't even know how we got on this topic. Sorry.
No, it's okay. We like a little bit of linguistics around here. It's fun.
Oh, you were asking. Yeah, you were asking about like life here. I think being an immigrant is hard, right? I mean, this is not news. Like there's a lot of things that are difficult when you move to another country. There's cultural shifts. There's a language shift. There's, adjusting to new social circles. There's, of course, politics, right? Like I have now been cursed to have to follow French politics to some degree. And it has its own Byzantine. It kind of makes me feel better about American politics, to be honest. Like you realize that our country is not the only country that has craziness under the hood.
In terms of a resurgent right wing, in terms of
yes, but I meant it more just in the sense of okay. So I remember when I was a grad student and Trump was like coming up. We had just had 8 years of Obama. And I remember one of the biggest shifts culturally that we were going through was this kind of sense of just sheer embarrassment that this was what American politics was now, right? That like instead of these, whatever else you want to say about Obama, he was a charismatic, well-spoken politician. And you would watch his debates and his political events, and you'd be like, all of the people in this room feel like serious adults talking about serious things. And then Trump's come in, and we've basically had pro wrestling as American politics for the last 10 years, right? And I remember that being like a shift that was embarrassing. Right. And I had a lab mate who was Costa Rican, and I remember she kind of made fun of us for this, that we were like so embarrassed by it, because she was like, this is just what politics is, And that's more what I mean. Like you go to another country and you start reading their political press, and you're like, oh yeah, okay. Like the reality of politics, in no matter what country you're in, sometimes it's serious and sometimes it's pro wrestling, and that's just human nature, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is something to that pro wrestling transition. I mean, W was embarrassing for different reasons, but idiot princeling is a recognizable archetype, right? Like lots of countries have done that. That's a very familiar mistake. But not every country has done Trump. Not every country has done a Berlusconi. Like that's
a lot of Western Hemisphere countries have, to be fair. I mean, like the United States becoming Latin American is a thing, I think.
Yeah. No, I think that there's real truth to that idea of like the U.S. kind of taking on this strongman Latin American aspect to its politics.
Caudillo. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I was going to ask Skelly if she's willing to talk about it, if she thinks that this is a permanent expat move, or if she might come back, or under what conditions, what points towards a return, what doesn't.
Yeah, no, I mean, so this is something I think about a lot, of course, because it's, what do you want to do with your life? What do I want to be when I grow up? So I've been in France about 3 years, and like I said, I'm really lucky to have a permanent position in a job that I really love, because I really love research, and it's really nice to I don't have any teaching responsibilities at my institute. I have like some light optional teaching if I want to do it, which is a fantastic deal that honestly you really can't even get in the United States, even before everything that was going on. So that's what I was talking about very obliquely earlier. I referenced I like the way that how research is organized in France. The sort of hard pure research tends to be a little separated from the teaching, which I think is nice on both ends. Because some people, they only want to teach. So from a career perspective, I really enjoy it in France. From personal perspective, I really like the European lifestyle. If you like follow my very random posts on Blue Sky, I occasionally get into a I hate cars so much vibe, which is, I am not a big suburb. I hate living in the suburbs. I hate having to drive everywhere. And I really like Europe because I like having a central downtown apartment. I like being able to walk the 15-minute city thing. That is 100% my vibe. And I like Europe as a place to live with it's very fun to have a very international perspective. I don't know, maybe this sounds very bourgeoisie of me, but if you live in Europe, it's so much more likely that you're going to have friends from different countries, right? It's way more common to live in France and have German friends and Spanish friends. Whereas when you live in the US, maybe if you live in California in the Southwest, you're going to maybe know some Mexican people. You probably know a few Canadians. They often sneak by, they often pass, which is really frustrating. I hate it when I find out someone's Canadian.
You can just use my name. It's fine.
Yeah. But, mostly you're very embedded in just this insular American culture. And so that's something I like about Europe, that you get this, it's fun. It's actually really cool to know people that live a very meaningfully different lifestyle than you, insofar as it's still Western Europe, and have those views. So sorry, this is a very rambling answer, but yeah, I really like Europe. I could see myself coming back to North America for sure, though. There's a lot of things I miss. I miss the North American, almost manic friendliness, the way that you can sit next to someone on a bus stop and within 15 minutes know their grandparents' names. I don't know. There's something very charming about that.
That's something I absolutely adore about the place I live. I called the local grocery store yesterday. We got basically a foot of snow here in Charlotte, which is insane. Just the amount of snow we got yesterday was crazy. But my wife wanted to make chili and I hadn't bought the stuff for that. So I had to call up the local grocery store, which is right across the street, and say, hey, are y'all open? And the woman who answered the phone said, yep, we're here until 4. I said, great. I'll, be by before then. Thanks very much. She said, okay, you stay safe out there. And just that little addition of referencing it's a big snowstorm, wishing the best in that very specific way. You see that all the time here. Every random interaction you have with somebody, you see something of that valence. And it's just it for all the bad things about living where I live, there are bad things about everywhere someone would choose to live. You can always find downsides. That is one thing that just for me makes up for it. So I could not handle living in France or the Scandies or Germany or in that way. I need that little bit of friendly social interaction with a total stranger. It just lights me up. And I give that back too.
I will say that with France, there's a big gradient. Actually, this is one of the reasons I love France particularly. I said this to a friend. I was like, I think everywhere in Europe, out of everywhere in Europe, I think I'd choose France again if I were to do it with the knowledge I have now. And they were shocked at this. And I was like, well, I think the reason is because to me, I'll alienate our European listeners, but to me, a lot of the northern countries do feel a little cold. Germany, the Scandies feel cold to me, but I think I'm too type A to deal with Italy and Spain. So I really like France because you get a gradient. The northern France feels a little bit more like the Netherlands, like Brussels, but then where I'm in southern France, it is warm. I mean, it's not Paris. People here are quite warm and very sweet often. I have managed to make pretty good friends just in the community, and they're always people want to practice their English with me and that kind of thing. So I would say if anyone is interested in France, don't just judge based on Paris.
Oh, yeah. I was actually going to say something about that too earlier. I can remember being when we visited Bordeaux and trying to order a ham sandwich at a patisserie boulangerie, and there was this ham and cheese sandwich, and I asked for a hamon, and the lady looks at me and goes I can't remember how to say this in French, but she goes are you from Spain? Just very confused because I'm 6'3" and very clearly American if you look at me, but I'm using that H, and I'm oh no merci madame, je suis américaine. Thank you so much, but
you're so sweet.
Yeah. So and that interaction, whereas if I had done that in Paris, they just would have given me the worst look and been like, no, do you want the ham and cheese sandwich in like perfect English, right? Like they're totally...
No, it would be very heavily accented English, but it disdainfully so.
Yeah.
I mean, Paris is New York, right? Like it's I think more than it being the French, it's a big city, right? And people they're impatient. They don't care about what your deal is. So, but one thing I just want to make sure I say this, because I think it's important for maybe North Americans, U.S. Americans who are feeling frustrated about their country right now. The thing, like, it's not just, Americans are good at small talk. The thing I miss the most about Americans, about American culture, is I take a great deal of pride, even now, especially now, in America being an immigrant country. Like, being a country that was built by immigrants, and that I know it's easy to be cynical about this right now, but truly, to this day, I see more genuine love and pride in our immigrant identity in Americans and North Americans in Western Hemisphere, in general, than I think like you ever are going to see in a European country. And I don't mean to say this to be negative about Europeans, but just the way that the countries on this side of the planet are, they have a different identifying myth. They have a different founding myth. And Americans, we are still raised, maybe this is a Californian bias, but I was very much raised with the idea that we have a fabric of people from around the world, from different cultures, and that this is a positive thing. And that we should understand ourselves as a culture that's knitting itself together. And I really appreciate Americans' overall curiosity and interest in other people and desire to find a way to incorporate new ideas and new cultural things into our own fabric. Like, one of the things I say to French people, I tell them this story because it's a silly story, but I think it's representative. And it's the Milwaukee Brewers. So the Milwaukee Brewers, they have the sausage race, right? Like, it's this baseball team, if you're not aware. So they have these ridiculous sausage mascots that come out and race during the seventh inning stretch. And they had originally, what was it? They had an Italian and a Polish and a brat, I think. Those were the three. And then a few years back, about a decade or two ago, they added a chorizo to celebrate the number of Latin American immigrants that they were having, Mexican immigrants they had in Milwaukee.
Also, because chorizo is delicious.
Yeah, and because chorizo is delicious. And it was so celebratory, and I think like that's kind of a silly thing, but it represents what I really appreciate about American culture. Like, the idea that it's not some fixed thing, that we're actually going to add. We're adding sausages into the mix.
That is the best of America is Milwaukee collecting sausages like they're the Infinity Stones.
America is the world's greatest sausage party. You heard it here, folks.
The racing chorizo, that should be on our flag.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to cut it off there. Skelly, thank you so much for joining us. If you would like to follow Skelly and see what she's thinking over time, you can follow her at iid.bsky.social. Always entertaining and lots going on over there. So thanks very much for joining us. And
thank you. Yeah, it was fun.
Enjoy your French winter. Bye.
Will too. Bye. Bye, guys.
But there is reason to be happy and optimistic this morning, because last night's special election in Texas, we'll start off talking about this. We're not going to spend the whole discussion on it, but we really need to talk about it because it's a bunch of stuff coming together at the same time. First off, special election on a Saturday in January Texas is cooking. Like, where did they come up with that scheduling?
Well, I mean, you figure the power grid's already failed, so people got nothing to do. You can just go down to the polling
ERCOT's
place.
Been solid the last couple of years. They're building enough batteries that it's fine.
I know, but I'm still going to get ERCOT jokes off.
Yeah,
George.
don't fight the narrative, George. But the thing that's fun is, like, it's a shot chaser effect, right? Because you saw the election in Minnesota, 3 days ago now, 4 days. Time isn't real.
Yeah, these were Harris 74% Harris districts in 2020.
Yeah, and then it turns out Assad number.
Yeah, like 95%.
Yeah, And then you're like, oh well, you're gonna expect
Assad would be embarrassed to put those numbers out.
Yeah, he'd be like, "This isn't realistic."
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely something happening here.
And then you see Texas, and now it's.
I will say about Texas that I expected it to be a bigger fall off in terms of turnout than it turned out to be. It was down about 20K total turnout from the November election. And given the margin, I would have thought that we would have lost more overall voters. That's not the driver. The driver, I guess, is persuasion.
Yeah, and just for context here, this is Senate District 9 in Tarrant County, Texas. Tarrant County is Fort Worth. So this is the Dallas Metroplex. This is suburban Dallas Republican core voters, right? Like this has been a deeply conservative Republican type district for my entire life. The last time a Democrat was in this seat was 1990. And that is still the holdover Democratic Party in Texas that goes back to the New Deal and even before that. So this is not, a tightly contested district that Democrats could have hoped to win. The other thing is the spending numbers here were absolutely unbelievable. They plowed, I think, was it $6 million into this race or $3 million? I'm forgetting the multiple of 3 that they plowed into it.
I thought it was like 2.5 or 3.5 million into a state Senate race.
Yeah, it was like a $2.2 million edge.
Yeah, in a state Senate special election in January, right? So you can't use the excuse, oh, well, this wasn't like they didn't put resources in. Oh, no, they absolutely, the president was tweeting about a Senate special election or truthing, whatever, posting about a Senate special election race. And this is the number they got. In a district where the median voter is probably like a guy in a 10-gallon bucket hat driving an F-250 to his accounting Yes,
job.
It's lifted, but other than that, yes.
And you lost with that guy. Yeah.
I mean, this is a county where there is a city called White Settlement.
Yeah. And the Democrat won White Settlement.
So we're talking a Republican plus 17 district here in the general election. Now, look, there are all sorts of different caveats you can apply to this, but we are talking a 15-point win for Democrats here on, 49,000 people turning out versus 70,000, I think, in the general election the last time it was run. Like, that's not a race where like only 10% of voters turn out and it's this tiny little no, this is 5-alarm fire. Like, you got your ass absolutely whipped and there's nothing you could have done about it. And there are read-throughs to the broader environment down there.
I assume that the entire state Republican Party is just cracking their cyanide teeth now and just getting it out of the way. Because you can't come back from this.
If anything, if half of this swing, if this election was half as big of a swing as it was, you would say, oh, we are on course to elect a Democrat for Senate in Texas. You would be pretty confident about that. And it was way bigger than that. Way bigger. So I am shocked that market prices for prediction market prices aren't moving more for this, because to me, this should be a massive prior updater. You should say, okay, Democrats are now favored to win the Senate heavily, not possible, but favored. This is gnarly. And Proctor's sort of shaking his head, going back and forth a little bit. So let's have a conversation about that.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd go. I don't know if I would go that far. I mean, this is a really good data point, but it's one data point, and it's a data point that is kind of weird for other reasons. So the Republican in this race is one of Texas's school board fucker uppers, and there's been some backlash.
That is their official name
against that particular strain of Texas Republican. She's one of the people who has glommed onto Texas school boards as explicitly a Christianist and has done some things that I think are frankly pretty shameful to the state of public education in Texas. So it may be that some of this was backlash against a particularly bad Republican candidate. That said, she was a well-funded Republican candidate. She had Trump posting on her behalf repeatedly. You wonder if she's a bad candidate, Are they all going to be bad candidates? So, like, this is definitely reason for optimism. This is definitely reason to think that, you know, we have a legitimate shot at taking the Senate seat in Texas with either Jasmine Crockett or with James Tallarico, which maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more. But, like, I don't know that I would necessarily move Dems to favored in the Senate on basis of this yet. It's still a bad map and an uphill struggle. But yes, like if we get this kind of a shift, if we get this kind of a shift nationally, we're gonna be at like 58 Dems in the Senate. The question is whether or not this is a reasonable bellwether for us getting. Yeah,
and I mean, I don't think you should assume this sort of shift nationally, to be clear. I think you should assume, I don't know, half, like something like that. If you had half of this shift nationally, you would be like, oh, wow, this is good news. And so that's why I'm like even a little bit more optimistic than Proctor is. And I just don't know where they find the votes.
What does a good Republican candidate that Trump will endorse look like?
Good question.
Right? Like, if this is a bad one, like, what is a good one? Who is going to be deranged enough that Trump will endorse them, but not also then just have complete pervert vibes and turn off the rest of the electorate? This is a real question because I can't think of one.
We thought the guy in Jersey looked like a good Republican candidate, and that looked great until people started voting, and then he got blown the fuck out. So you know, it may be that it just doesn't exist. It may be that, you know, even the relatively normie Republican candidates are not sufficient to overcome skew at this point. That basically this is going to be a blue electorate, and it doesn't matter who you put out there. I think you would have to be
a Republican who ran explicitly against Trump.
I feel,
and then you might die.
And
so,
I feel, you know who I feel really bad for right now is Charlie Crist.
No, you don't,
because this is an environment where he might be able to actually come within like 5 points before the Florida Democrats inevitably piss it away. But
I think even the Florida Democrats have a shot in this environment. It's that bad. I mean,
if the environment is that bad, then yes, I think they do have a shot.
Who are the candidates?
Like
who are you guys even running for?
I think the guy's name is like
office?
David Jolly or something. I've never heard of the guy.
Former congressman, if that's who it is.
That's probably right. I'm not optimistic, but who knows? Maybe it really is that bad for them.
Alex Vindman is in the...
Oh, yeah, right. He's getting in the race. Sure, why not?
Yeah, he's in the primary. I mean, he's got resist lib credentials all over the place.
Sure, let's do Vindman. He's got some name recognition. He's got a good story.
I think Virginia showed that it really doesn't matter who you run. We'll see, but suffice to say that all electoral evidence is pointing to an extremely bad year for Republicans. There are other data points you can rely on to forecast something different, and, you know, we'll see. But last night's results incredibly encouraging to me personally. And yeah, I mean, do we want to talk about the Tallarico versus Crockett Senate primary for Democrats in Texas?
Sure. I mean, we can talk about it for very, very briefly. So the background here is that James Tallarico is choir boy looking dude, preacher, young, baby-faced, who is running on a fairly progressive platform. I don't think there's actually all that much daylight in between Crockett's politics and Tallarico's politics per se. It's possible that Tallarico is in many ways further left than Crockett, who has crypto money all over her, among other things. But Jasmine Crockett is very, very good on TV and has kind of garnered a reputation as a firebrand leftist. And the conventional wisdom on this has been that Crockett is going to be a worse nominee for the general election than Tallarico or before he dropped, Colin Allred would have been. I'm not convinced that's true. The polling doesn't really bear that out. It's maybe a point or two on the GE margins, and we haven't really seen anything that makes it look all that different. That said, even if you concede that there's a couple of points difference between Tallarico and Crockett in the GE, it may be that these swings are big enough that it just doesn't matter. That whoever gets through the Democratic primary is going to be the favorite against whoever gets through the Republican primary. They also have a problem where, the John Cornyn, who's the incumbent, who's kind of I would describe him as sort of right moderate, a Republican from an earlier age in some ways, versus Paxton, who's the sitting attorney general in Texas, who is abhorrent in every way you can imagine, and several ways you haven't thought of yet.
Creative.
And
I think I would say that
and he's just.
I would
the
say
worst.
that Cornyn is not a frothing lunatic. Is about the best I could say for him.
Yeah, that's fair.
Which I do.
Cornyn is an institutionalist. Paxton is a bomb
And
thrower.
I do think that if we've talked about this before, but if Paxton goes through, you're going to have Republicans voting against him in the general election. Like, that will happen. The question is how many, and unclear. Whereas if Cornyn goes through, I don't think that's the case. I think you might have people not turn out to vote, or leave it blank, but I don't think you'll have people voting against him. So they do. For any candidate quality issues you may perceive between Tallarico or Crockett, in either direction, I think you can make arguments against or for either one without getting too, far from reality. The candidate quality issues on the Republican side, if Paxton wins, are orders of magnitude larger. Like, it is going to be a decent candidate for Democrats either way, depending on how you spin it, versus a terrible candidate for Republicans, which is basically what we saw in SD9, right? I mean, it's the same. That's another reason to think that Texas is going to flip this Texas Senate seat is going to flip. And if Texas flips, I am extremely confident North Carolina flips. You need what? 2 more? And that's it. So Senate control is something we need to be starting to talk about and how we're going to use that.
Yeah.
And I will say, winning the House would be great. Winning the Senate is a way bigger deal. It is a way bigger deal for a bunch of reasons. Reason number one is just it's harder to win back control of the Senate if over time, because they're 6-year terms. It's not a 2-year term. So it's just harder a seat in the Senate is longer tenured and therefore worth control for a longer period of time. So it's more valuable in that sense. The second thing is we play against a much worse stacked deck in the Senate. We have some gerrymandered advantages in the House and Republicans have some gerrymandered advantages in the House. It kind of nets out to a modest advantage for Republicans overall. It's a real advantage, but it's not as big as the Senate advantage. And the third thing is confirmations, right? If Democrats control the Senate, we control the confirmation process. If Democrats win the House, you have all sorts of investigatory and oversight powers that are very valuable and great, like wonderful, but you can't block, for instance, a Fed Board of Governors nominee, a Supreme Court nominee, anything like that. So I would not be surprised if we see multiple Supreme Court retirees in the middle of the year after this term, given how things look to be shaping up. Of course, Alito and Thomas may just do a Ruth Bader Ginsburg and say, okay, we're going to stay on. But the replacements to those justices, should they retire or, suffer it happening in the second half of Trump's term with the Democrats in control of the Senate, are going to look extremely different than if they were to step down today.
If we get veto power on nominations by taking the Senate, that is a huge deal. The Senate can much more directly check the executive through that mechanism than the House can. And that's also something that functions more as a matter of higher turnover within the executive branch. The more that there are executive positions that Trump has to come back to the Senate to fill, the more ability the Senate has to check him. And we're seeing some of that play out right now with just the standard calendar turnover with Fed nominations, because Trump is having to come back because he's got to appoint a new Fed chair. And it remains to be seen a little bit how tough that nomination fight is going to be, how tough that confirmation fight is going to be. But you have at least some Republican senators already saying that they're not going to vote for anybody until Trump does X, Y, and Z in terms of dropping pressure that he's putting on the Fed. And that's the kind of thing that could move the needle potentially.
All right. Speaking of the Fed, we got the Warsh nomination this week. Kevin Warsh, we're not going to spend too much time on this, but this guy is partisan hack. He's just not as insane of a partisan hack as Kevin Hassett, who was, as of December, the favorite to be nominated was. So from my perspective, I think the FOMC is going to be more politicized by this appointment, which is bad. It's going to be less reliable as a macroeconomic manager. That's bad. But in terms of trying to completely overtake the FOMC and turn it into an arm of the Oval Office, I think the risks of that are relatively low with Warsh. They're not zero, but they're relatively low. So bit of a bullet dodge there. Waller may step off the FOMC, which would not be great because Waller is, again, very reasonable. He's Trump appointed and he wants to favor Republicans, but not to any extreme degree like taking away control of interest rate setting from the FOMC or something like that. So that's good. Also notable in the most recent rates decision, Waller dissented. Mirren, whose term expires his term is expired now. We're recording this on February 1st. He's going to stay on the FOMC until he's replaced, but his term is expired. His vote with Waller was to cut rates when the rest of the FOMC said no, including Bauman, who was never in the running for Fed chair. That's interesting because she's not behaving as like a pure ideologue in that sense, in like she could have joined the other two to increase the weight of their argument around cutting rates, and she didn't. So I see a series of things about the FOMC that suggest that the control of monetary policy in this country is going to be more politicized because of Warsh, but the concern that it would just be overtaken entirely by partisans and set that way is not real. One other funny thing I do want to point out. So this morning, Nick Timiraos of the Wall Street Journal reported that Trump at a dinner last night suggested that he could sue Warsh. Warsh was actually at this dinner. He could sue Warsh if Warsh didn't cut rates enough after being confirmed as chair. Oh, one other brief tangent here. Sorry. Senate Republican Tom Tillis is the 13th Republican on the Senate Banking Committee. And because Powell is being investigated by the DOJ, Tillis has said he will not confirm anyone for the Board of Governors in the Senate. He will not allow that nomination to move forward until those charges are dropped, regardless of what happens with them. So, in other words, for the rest of this year, as long as those charges are in place, Tillis is retiring at the end of the year, the Warsh nomination can't move forward. You know, he can sit on the sidelines, but he can't go into the Fed. He's not the chair. He hasn't been confirmed by the Senate yet. I suspect they'll just drop the charges. Like, I just don't see how any other way that goes out. But there is a real possibility here that they get stuck in and say, no, we're not dropping the charges, and we're going to continue that investigation. And Tillis maintains his hold on Fed nominees, and then Democrats control the Senate, and everything changes. So that's like a fun subplot to watch. Last thing on the Fed, I will point out, was this dinner. So Trump said, well, Warsh was presumably in the audience. We think he was in the audience. I'll sue Warsh if he doesn't cut rates. Well, Warsh is just one guy on the FOMC. Like, it's such a classic Trump misunderstanding of how the world works that he thinks there's one guy who's just turning a dial, and it's like, nah, bro. Like, there's...
I mean, it's oatmeal brain. Yeah. Although... I do enjoy how the left hand is punching the right hand in the face. I ruined that metaphor because I don't know if anyone else has looked at this, but a certain Kevin Warsh shows up in a St. Barth's Christmas in the most recent Epstein files drop. So that's fun questions to be asking.
Definitely. One more econ thing I will point out. We had talked in the past about the Department of Labor, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and who would be commissioner there. In the middle of last year, Trump tried to appoint a Nazi boat enthusiast to run it. That didn't work out. The Senate was like, no, dude, we're not confirming that guy. So we got a pick this week from the president to run the BLS. Staffer by the name of Brett Matsumoto. I don't know Brett personally. I've never interacted with him personally. But what I will say is a large number of people that I have a lot of trust in their judgment say he's great. He is a career economist at the BLS. He was seconded over to CEA for a year, which normally would raise concerns, but this is not the guy that has been co-opted to be an apparatchik at BLS. So I think we have dodged two major bullets in the past couple weeks around who is going to be running macroeconomic monetary policy and producing statistics related to the economy in the U.S. And that is reason to celebrate, and also a sign that the Trump administration's wave has crested and is...
Yeah, I think with Matsumoto, the reasons to be wary of him are just that he's been nominated for it. Like that's the extent of the argument against him is the fact of the nomination. So from that perspective,
100%.
That's as good as we could possibly do.
He's a career guy and he's on Blue Sky, which is a pretty good signal.
Absolutely not.
Segment break here, I guess, or should we? What do you want to talk about next?
I was going to talk Epstein for a minute.
By all means.
Ooh, delightful.
This is going to be a lot longer than Proctor.
Yeah, so I haven't read the new Epstein drop. I haven't really gone digging around in it because I'm a bad citizen.
You just don't want to address Russell Wilson being in there.
It's got a point.
Yeah, I'm kind of, well, okay, so Russell Wilson is in there because apparently he was negotiating to buy a plane from Epstein, which he ultimately did not buy. But Russell Wilson is in the Epstein files, and that's not something I'm excited about.
Lots of people are in them now.
There are lots of other people in the Epstein files, many of whom I am excited to find in there. And one thing I'm really struck by from this dump is how Jeffrey Epstein had much more connection to all the evils in the world than I necessarily would have anticipated. You know, I thought this guy was operating a morally abhorrent operation to, you know, sex traffic people, but I didn't realize he had his hand in international geopolitics or in like Activision loot boxes
Or in 4chan.
quite the way he seems to have been. Like looking through these emails, you get the sense that Epstein is. Well, yeah. No, so what we're talking about here is that apparently Epstein had a meeting with Moot, who is the guy who ran 4chan, the day that 4chan set up Poll, which none of these words should mean anything to you. Log off if they do. But Poll is the subforum of 4chan. All right, I'm going to toss to Ed for the
Yes. As the resident extremely too online as opposed to everyone else who's just very too online. For those who don't know, 4chan is the worst place on the internet and has been basically, you know, unquestioned for 25 years. But 4chan has worse places on 4chan than just, it has peaks and valleys, and one of them is Poll. The denizens of Poll refer to themselves cunningly by a racial slur against Polish people. And that's kind of where you start with these people. They are white supremacists, they are rampant anti-Semites, and most memes that if you ever saw one and said, I might have to hand it to them a little bit, this one's kind of funny, came out of there. And it turns out that the day that Poll was brought back, because it was shut down originally, some people who are of equal levels of two internet did know Chris Poole at the time and convinced him to shut down Poll because Moot has a history of being very suggestible. When Gamergate came around, he actually was persuaded to ban discussion of it from the site, which did not go as well as people hoped. But anyway, it turns out that he met Jeffrey Epstein and the same day turned Poll back on. The same day. And is that necessarily indicative? No, but it does add another, charcoal briquette to the fire of everything bad from the last 30 years really was a cabal of pedophile billionaires. And I'm not really prepared for this to be true. I have trouble with this, but a lot of friends I've known for like 30 years, and I have just been like texting each other question marks and I don't know, man, for like the last 2 days. Because why? Why does a billionaire know about this? Why does he care? I mean, Elon Musk is here now and like paid billions of dollars to be the forum mod on Twitter. But like, how are we here? How is people have been like, oh, the internet's not real for my entire life. And these fucking bastards have proven that it is, because this has kind of been the way that they have built power for my entire life. So I'm not taking this well, gentlemen.
I am just waiting for the email to drop that has Epstein suggesting to Low-Tax that he ban hentai from the Something Awful boards.
I'm not willing to go that far, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are some suggestions about spine surgery.
Let's talk about the loot box stuff too. I mean, I'm loath to bring up gaming, but we do need to discuss gaming because it appears that loot boxes were an idea that came from Epstein as well.
This was George.
Yes.
He is perk.es at Blue Sky.
Loot boxes are a thing in games where you pay some money, typically abstracted through an in-game currency that you buy with actual currency, to get a blind box, effectively, that you then open and it contains something. And one advantage of structuring sales in this way is that it's gambling, right? Like, you've got the ability to buy something and it's a lot of scratch off, and you might get something really rare and valuable, or you might get something that's not worth very much. It's a way of obscuring what you're paying for, but it's also a way of creating chase items within the game. It wires people for gambling, and putting it in games that young kids play is generally regarded as not a great thing for those young kids, or for their development, or for the game. And apparently it was Jeffrey Epstein's idea to suggest that to Bobby Kotick, who was at the time running Activision and Blizzard. That was both ATVI, right?
Activision Blizzard.
Yeah.
Yep.
And who I think in the rear view is generally regarded as sort of having done significant damage to Activision and Blizzard.
And society.
Which for many years were two of the most trusted names in gaming. And society.
Yeah, no, and like, I have a lot of friends who have worked on those games, and I'm sorry, but they should all be in jail. Like, these things are terrible. These are bad for people, and they have just infected everything now. And surprise, it is yet another fruit of the poisoned Epstein tree. What are we even doing here, guy?
He's like the Forrest Gump of everything bad in our society.
He is. Oh, I don't like this universe. Can we get a new one?
I was going to do a life is like a box of chocolates joke, but changing some words, and we're not. No, it's too much.
There's no way to get that is not going to get you yelled at by me.
I posted this on Blue Sky already, but in some ways I find this kind of heartening, because it's strong evidence that there are demons who walk among us spreading evil, but it also suggests that maybe there's not that many of them.
Why is that heartening?
Because there's not that many of them. I mean, like, if this is something where like Jeffrey Epstein personally is the source of like 60% of the world's evils, then we have an attack surface there. We have an attack surface that we've already succeeded at.
He's dead.
If it turns out that actually it is just Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump and Steve Bannon and they're the fucking problem, then there's a way forward on that.
Bannon.
If it turns out that 45% of humanity is ontologically evil, then that's harder.
Worse, they're ontologically gamers.
But if it's just a few extremely influential bad guys.
Yeah, but the problem is 45% of humanity is in these damn emails, Proctor.
Only the ones with a positive network.
What I have skimmed out of the emails is that the areas that really have the most problem with this, honestly, is academia. That's what I think is going to be hardest hit by this tranche drop, is that there are a lot of eminent academics, including a significant percentage of everybody you've seen who's written a pop sociology book that goes in airport bookstores, that were on these emails. And some of the content of the emails was more than superficial. This wasn't just, hey, how you doing? This is, boy, I sure love your island where we rape children. When can I come to your island where we rape children?
Yeah, it's bad.
Are there going to be an array of children for me to rape? Like, you've got extremely close involvement from some people who maybe previously had deniability that no longer have any deniability, which includes some cabinet members. Howard Lutnick is in the emails impeaching things he's previously said about when he cut ties with Epstein, that he was just lying, that he didn't cut ties with Epstein when he said he cut ties with Epstein. And, that I think that if we get more of these documents, to the extent that we get more of these documents, it's useful to put these people on the record as saying exactly what the extent of their relationship was with Epstein and when they moved away from him, if they're claiming to have moved away from him, if they're claiming to have cut ties, because these documents are very effective at impeaching that. I don't know if Lutnick is going to have to answer for this in any way, but it's clear that he just got up and lied when he said that he cut ties with Epstein in 2005 or whenever he said he did. He's in the emails talking about bringing his children to visit Epstein Island in 2012, which is after Epstein was back out of house arrest for sex crimes. So
one of the things that and I apologize, I forget who originally said this, but it is interesting seeing how many people Barry Weiss is trying to rehabilitate that are in these files. There are multiple people on that new CBS News masthead that are in the Epstein files, and others who probably would be if they weren't incredibly toxic. Hello, Larry Summers. It's a bad scene. And it kind of goes back to are there really just 5 bosses that we just have to defeat to unlock, world peace? I like this theory, Propter. I'm hoping we get to put it into practice.
It feels like Barry Weiss is a very good candidate for being another one of those. And the reason I say this is because everything I've heard from people that know her is that she has a degree of charisma that is extreme. People really like this woman when they get in the room with her. And that is a large degree of where her, I hesitate to call it success, but where her prominence has come from is that she has that sort of charisma, which everything we can tell from the Epstein docs we've gotten in this most recent dump and historically was his whole deal as well. This guy just made people like him in a way that is extremely unusual. I think we've all come across in our lives people who have a degree of magnetism where people just want to please that person for whatever reason. This guy had it on a level that is unbelievable, that just people were fawning all over him. And I know there's sort of a cruder explanation for this where they're just where you say, well, he was just had something they wanted, children to rape, but it clearly goes beyond that. It clearly goes far beyond that in how people talk to him, how he was able to avoid accountability for so long. Early in his career, before any of this was ever a thing, how he worked his way into a teaching career and eventually a career in finance. This guy just had something that made people turn on. And Weiss has a degree of that as well. Probably not to the same degree, but every indication is that she has something as well like that. It kind of bothers me because now it's starting to sound like I'm so suspicious of people that have a degree of charisma that, I maybe am coming across as almost antisocial, but I really think that is an interesting dynamic in this where people were able to use their charisma to hack the system and be that malevolent force.
I mean, I agree with you generally, but it's not at just the large; it's the small too, right? Look at all these petty kingdom YouTuber assholes who are out there flogging whatever the newest crypto or the newest gambling thing is. Their audiences are smaller, but they've got the hooks in, right? This is just kind of what you get when you have a system built on this level of grift. You're going to get really, really good grifters. You have selected for grift, and surprise, it sucks. We have a really high resolution but very low frame rate Propter right now, and I find it unsettling.
We have a From Software Propter right now.
In King.
Should we wrap it there? We've already gone 41 minutes.
I think we might have to.
Yeah, I think we have to wrap it there because we just lost Propter, whose internet has entered full potato. So you won't hear him on the sign-off this week, but thanks for joining us this week. In Charlotte, buried under roughly a foot of snow, I'm George.
In outer Florida, not buried under snow, but it's 10 degrees outside. This is Low Tax Speed Run Enjoyer.
I'm not Proctor in DC, but I am Ed in Boston.
And hopefully Proctor in DC is just suffering from internet issues. He shall return, we assume. We'll check on that. Stay normal, y'all.